So now that WrestleMania 37 has come and gone, the attention now turns to WWE's next big event, that being SummerSlam, of course, in August. Now, WWE is reportedly already planning for the biggest event of the summer, and they are reportedly planning to have fans at the events. Now, WWE is reportedly looking at having fans in the crowd for the 2021 SummerSlam pay-per-view. Now, WWE hasn't announced the date or location for SummerSlam as of writing just yet, but Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated has reported that the current plan is to hold SummerSlam in front of a live crowd. Now, WWE's announcement on their Thunderdome residency at the Youngling Center in Tampa noted that events at this venue will remain on a closed set with no fans in attendance. The company is expected to wrap up this residency on Monday, August 2nd, but there's no word on where they are heading next. The biggest show of the summer is usually held in late August, so it's likely that SummerSlam would be held at a new venue. Now, WWE's President and Chief Revenue Officer Nick Khan indicated earlier this month, we actually spoke about this here on the channel, that the company may have some big news to announce soon when it comes to touring. It was reported in 2020 that WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon was determined to have fans at last year's SummerSlam event, but obviously, of course, that did not happen. Fans actually returned at WrestleMania 37 last week, so it'll be interesting to see if they can make it happen this year after a successful WrestleMania 37 weekend with fans in attendance. So it's certainly an interesting story. Certainly a very interesting story when it comes to SummerSlam having fans in attendance. To be honest with you, if I'm going to be honest with you, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense to have fans in attendance. You can absolutely have SummerSlam in a stadium. I'm not massively up on when it comes to NFL and all these American sports, so I don't know which stadium you could do it in. I'm pretty sure, though, if WWE wanted to, in the state of Florida, they could certainly find, at the very least, if it's not a stadium, some kind of outdoors venue. To be honest, though, it's not just Florida now that are opening up, isn't it? It's the likes of Texas that are also opening up. So who's to say they can't do it in Texas as well, or possibly another state with an outdoors venue? So there certainly are possibilities for WWE to do an outside event, an outside show for SummerSlam, and I think it's right. I think it's right. I think we've seen when it comes to WrestleMania that Obviously, it was WrestleMania, so having it in a big stadium is kind of tradition, if you will. But when it comes to the fans in attendance, it just made it feel so much more special, didn't it? It really did make it feel so much more special, and it made it feel just. It was a moment. It was just an absolute moment, and I keep thinking about this at the moment because it really was such a big moment. I keep thinking about this that couple of minutes before WrestleMania Night 1 went up on the air on Saturday, just the countdown when you're watching the kickoff show and you could hear the fans in the background just sort of rumbling and waiting for the show to go on the air. And obviously there was the delay because of the weather, but just having that reaction, and it was emotional. And people like Rhea Ripley and Edge and all those people on the stage were crying because it felt so special. It felt so special. Now, I'm not saying they can replicate that when it comes to SummerSlam. Look, that was the first time that fans were in attendance in over a year. I don't know if they can replicate that when it comes to SummerSlam, but it makes SummerSlam feel big. And SummerSlam is a big event. Now, it used to be the second biggest show of the year. It used to be WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and then the Royal Rumble. I think the Royal Rumble was overtaking that in recent years. I think it's WrestleMania, the Rumble, and then SummerSlam, and then Survivor Series all the way down there now. But SummerSlam is still a massive event, and it can absolutely be done in a stadium. And the thing is, when it comes to the pandemic right now, is who really knows anymore about what you can and can't do and what's safe and isn't safe. I think when it comes to August, that's 4 months or so away. A lot can change in 4 months. A lot can change negatively and positively in 4 months. So I don't suspect we'll get an announcement when it comes to SummerSlam, at least until maybe June, maybe early June. We might hear something. Maybe at the end of May. I don't know. I don't think we'll hear anything in terms of SummerSlam in terms of the next month or so. We've seen when it comes to WrestleMania, look, the WrestleMania tickets were put on sale, in March? About a month before the event went on the air. So who's to say that we don't have an announcement when it comes to SummerSlam in July, in the middle of in July or something? Because that's because of the complex situation when it comes to the pandemic right now. You kind of have to just keep playing it by ear, and they're WWE, and obviously if they do a show in a stadium, I think it will still be limited capacity. I don't think they're going to try and do a sellout. They tried to do a lot of fans for WrestleMania, didn't they? The initial plan was 45,000. In the end, the local authority said to them, no, 45 is too much. We'll go down to 25. it could be more than that. It could be more than that. Like I said, when it comes to the vaccination process, when it comes to herd immunity and all that kind of stuff, I don't profess myself to be an expert at all, but fans in attendance to SummerSlam, that does seem reasonable, considering they did it in April at WrestleMania. Who's to say they can't do it when it comes to August? And if they do that, fantastic. Now, this kind of discussion point of, is it going to mark WWE's return to touring? I don't necessarily see that, to be honest. I think that's still a stretch. I don't see a scenario where WWE goes back to touring and possibly until the end of the year. Maybe they might just leave it to the end of the year and go, you know what, 2022, we'll just kick off the year in the bang, we'll start touring that way. That might be the way to do it. That might be the right way to do it. And by touring as well, people kind of get a little bit confused. I think by touring, people have to realize that touring doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be doing live events 4 or 5 nights a week again. I think that is still a long, long way off, going to a different single town every single night. I can't see that. I think when they mean touring, they mean, okay, Raw is going to be in a different city for each taping every single week. SmackDown's going to be in a different city every single week. The idea of going back to the live events schedule, again, I'm not necessarily sure I see that for a while. I do think live events will come back for WWE, just on the scale that they were previously. I just don't see that, not just because of the pandemic, but also because of the business model. We've seen at this point that idea of going to a different town every single night, doing the live events, it's just a bit of an outdated business model at this point. We've seen that companies like AEW have proved it, and this was even prior to the pandemic, that you can be a profitable company without that live event schedule, because really what's driving the revenue in professional wrestling at this point is television rights fees. That's what's driving the revenue. So I don't know if WWE will ever get back to that schedule of having 5 nights a week different live events. Maybe. I don't know if the demand will be there. The demand possibly wasn't even there previously, as we were in like 2019 anyway. So I think the pandemic fundamentally has changed a lot of things about the professional wrestling industry. But SummerSlam, I don't know if it will mark, as I mentioned, the return to touring full time, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if we get to a point where it certainly does mark maybe Raw going back on the road or SmackDown going back on the road. But at the very least, I think I would be very, very, very surprised if we didn't have fans in attendance at SummerSlam. That seems now a reasonable target to make. Last year, as I mentioned in the report, Vince McMahon was still aiming for Boston last year, and that was the original plan for SummerSlam. And at the time, everyone was kind of going, I know they're your plans, but that's ludicrous, even then. Now, it seems reasonable. It seems far more reasonable and far more rational, so we'll have to wait and see. And if fans are returning, that's fantastic, because it made WrestleMania far, far better. Even though, can you imagine that second night of WrestleMania 37, if that was in the Thunderdome, in the kind of that sterilized environment, that would have been a tough show to watch. That really would have been a tough show to watch. Thank God that strong main event was in front of a live crowd, and it had the interaction and atmosphere of the live crowd, because it really did take the upper level. So I'm expecting to see fans returning at SummerSlam. Now, while we're talking WWE, I did want to talk on some other topics briefly. Now, we have the overnight ratings for the post-WrestleMania episode of SmackDown on Fox. Now, Friday SmackDown on Fox drew an average of 1.997 million viewers in the overnight ratings, according to Showbuzz Daily. Hour 1 drew 2.001 million viewers, and then the Hour 2 went down to 1.992 million viewers. SmackDown also drew an average of a 0.5 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic, which was tied second for the night. The top spot went to Shark Tank and Blue Bloods. If the number holds up, which isn't always the case, that must be stated, it isn't always the case. These overnight ratings do fluctuate quite a bit, and they have been, especially over the course of the last 12 months. But if the number does hold up, it would be down 11.2% in viewership from last Friday's SmackDown, which drew an average of 2.250 million viewers with a 0.61 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic. Now, that is really interesting. And again, I don't want to dwell on it too much, because sometimes when I've been doing these videos, I've spoken about overnight ratings when it comes to SmackDown, and then in the end, it's completely wrong, or it's just not completely wrong, but certainly because we're talking about the difference of last week was 2.250, and this week it's about 2 million, 1.997, but let's call it, let's round it up to a 2, you would say, oh, that's really down. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It could be confirmed that actually this week's post-WrestleMania edition is exactly the same as last week. So we won't dwell on it too much. If it does hold up, they'll be disappointed with that. Obviously, the post-WrestleMania editions of any show, Raw or SmackDown, they're hoping big numbers. And you can look into a variety of reasons as to why it didn't draw as well as they thought this past week on SmackDown. I didn't think the show was bad. I didn't think it was necessarily amazingly good either. It didn't feel like a post-WrestleMania edition of SmackDown. And that goes the same with Raw this week. You didn't come out of it and you were expecting these big things to happen, new people to debut. The first SmackDown or Raw after WrestleMania normally feels like a season premiere, if you will, of new people coming on, new storylines, new directions, whatever. Everything's got to feel new, feel fresh. And the only thing that felt new on both shows was the commentary team, and the commentary team on Raw wasn't good. I don't think Adnan Virk did a fantastic job. I think he's got a long way to go. He's got to familiarize himself with the product massively. I think the SmackDown, new commentary team on SmackDown of Cole and McAfee was really good, and I think McAfee's really strong, and I think he did a great job. I think overall on the show that not a lot felt new. And yes, you had new champions, and yes, you had Cesaro square up to Roman Reigns, which is great, but it didn't feel big. The show didn't feel big. It felt very much like more of the same that we'd seen prior to WrestleMania. It didn't feel fresh. It didn't feel, you know, something new, something different. It didn't feel like that. And maybe that's what's turned viewers off. Or maybe last week the viewers that did tune into SmackDown were a bit annoyed, and I don't blame them. They hyped up as WrestleMania SmackDown last week, and let's be honest, they didn't really get that. They got a glorified clip show, really, prior to WrestleMania. They got, obviously, the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Obviously, they got a SmackDown Tag Team Championship match, but apart from that, they got 3 promos from Edge, Daniel Bryan, and Roman Reigns, and that was about it. They didn't get much of a show last week, and maybe those viewers that are the casual fans, I don't know how many of those there are, but maybe those that are the casual fans, maybe they did tune in to SmackDown last week, and they said, you know what, actually, I tuned in expecting this big WrestleMania edition of SmackDown, and I didn't get it. I'm not going to tune in next week. Why would I do that? So it's certainly interesting. Again, I don't want to dwell on it too much because sometimes these numbers change and they do fluctuate, and we could be having a completely different conversation tomorrow when we talk about it. So once they get confirmed, we'll speak about it here on the channel, but that's certainly interesting. And finally, what I did want to talk about is WrestleMania 37 and that famous or infamous botch by Michael Cole in the main event between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. Now, this was some comments were made by Corey Graves on the latest episode of After the Bow. He spoke about the differences from Saturday show to Sunday show. He spoke about being on commentary. Experience night one live was different. Because it was the first show with fans in over a year and all that kind of stuff. But he did talk about the botch. He did talk about the botch between Michael Cole made when it came to the Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair match. Now, during the main event of night one, commentator Michael Cole thought the finish of the match wasn't the end, assuming that Sasha Banks had kicked out of Bianca Belair's finisher. This led to some immediate criticism online of Michael Cole, saying he ruined the finish of the match and Belair's moment by saying that Banks had kicked out. Graves talked about Cole's botch, saying it was an honest mistake because he thought the match wasn't over too. He said, quote, "If there's anybody that's truly unshakable, it's Michael Cole. Cole felt bad, he felt terrible, but I can relate. I almost thought the same thing from our vantage point. It was not crystal clear. I'm not making excuses because it was what it is. It didn't take anything away from the amazing moment. It was reality. It was a very genuine, real reaction. Take into consideration, yes, we have the monitor. Yes, we have audio in our headphones, but we're also in a stadium full of 20,000 people. Any wrestler's book that you ever read says being in a stadium is very different than an arena because it takes a second. The sound has to leave and come back before it can truly register. I myself wasn't sure. Hey, it's the main event of WrestleMania. People have kicked out of each other's finishes 35 times already tonight. Why wouldn't this be any different? It was a genuine shock after that, so everyone leave Michael Cole alone. Now, to be honest, I spoke about it briefly when we did the post show. When we did the post show, talking about night one and Michael Cole botching the ending. It's not a big deal. It's funny. It'll end up on Botchamania. It's one of those things. I don't even know if going forward when they do the whole on the network or on Peacock, it probably will be edited out. People will forget about it. It's one of those things. It didn't ruin the moment. It did not ruin the moment. It didn't ruin the match. People that are saying that it ruined the moment or it ruined the match, it's just ridiculous, because it didn't. It didn't ruin the moment. It didn't ruin the match. It was funny watching it live. Again, and this is probably because I was doing the watch along at the time, so I'm talking, I'm reading live comments, I'm watching the show, I'm doing like 3 things at once. And I'm not the best multitasker anyway, but I didn't even notice it. I didn't even notice it at the time. I had to go back and watch it. So, again, I don't think it ruined anything. I thought the match was fantastic. I thought the moment of Bianca Belair celebrating afterwards, Sasha Banks on the outside seething with how the match had gone, I thought it was fantastic. I don't think Michael Cole ruined anything. So I think people that are criticizing Michael Cole for that, you're looking for stuff to criticize, I think, at the end of the day. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on some of the stories we've spoken about today? Fans returning at SummerSlam in the summer, the SmackDown overnight ratings declining from last week, and the Michael Cole botch at WrestleMania. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.